what is that? Somebody needs to pay attention to that. We got another letter from a man in Seymour, Connecticut, who said that the independent school district up there, the security director for the school, sent home a pamphlet from FEMA that had a portion that needed to be filled out by the family of the student, and his daughter brought it home. You know, the teachers are telling her, you got to get this filled out, your parents got to get this filled out. So his daughter brings it home, he starts looking over it, he says, oh no, he says, these are very intrusive and very personal questions. Why does FEMA need to know this? You know, this is ridiculous. Why does the school security director and FEMA need to know this? That's just one other one. I have another letter from a man in not Augusta, it's east of Wichita. No, he was in Augusta, I'm sorry, which is east of Wichita. And he said that, you know, that there's building FEMA facilities on every vacant space in the school where his child goes. FEMA is building on FEMA facility shelters on every vacant space they can build on the school ground. Now, what does that tell you? Think about schools for a minute. You have restrooms, you have showers in the gym, you have the auditoriums, you have a cafeteria. You know, you move out the desks and you can put people up for how long?
As long as you want, as long as you need.
Exactly. And these are just you know, that's just a smattering of some of the letters we've gotten. We've also gotten letters telling us we're crazy. But you know what? There's too much going on for us to sit back and say, no. This is not happening. And if somebody, you know, you had mentioned them being able to forcibly vaccinate you. If somebody doesn't believe that's a possibility, you need to look up the Model State Emergency Health Powers Act. That's already been established. And almost every state in the United States has adopted that in part or in full. And in that particular document, they actually can force treat you on the word of one or two people saying, oh, you know what, Debbie Lewis has smallpox. They can come in my house, according to the Model State Emergency Health Powers Act, depending on which part of it they passed for Missouri, of course, but I know for sure in Oklahoma, Arizona, and in Massachusetts, because we had people confirm this for us, they can come in your home on the word of one or two people and forcibly treat you for smallpox on the suspicion that you have it. They don't have to prove that you have it. They can go ahead and give you the vaccine anyway.
I ran stories about this over 8 years ago in the Free American, that Model Health Act. It's been in place that long, folks.
Yeah.
And,
it has. But
and by the way, you walk into any Walgreens, man, you got we can give you your shot right now. We made it better now. We've included the H1N1 virus in with your regular flu shot. So.
Yep. Exactly.
The first time they tried to kill me was after a vaccination gave me spinal meningitis.
Oh wow.
You know. Now let me ask you this. Now. I had invited William on, but you said he wasn't feeling well. Tell me about that. Frankly, I'm very suspicious of somebody that is as active and prolific as William is, and suddenly they've got an illness. You know, Aaron Russo came out with the whole story about Nicholas Rockefeller wanting to chip everybody, and he died of cancer immediately after that. I invited Aaron Zellman on Jews for Preservation of Firearms Ownership. I've known Aaron for years, and I invited him on my show, and I gave him a link on my site, just as I've got links on your site, to Jews for Preservation of Firearms Ownership. And within a week, he was dead. What's happened to William? What's going on with William? How's his health? What's happening?
We don't tell this story very much because it's just not something we want to get out. But during the filming of Don't Tread on Me, when we were talking about the actual solutions to all of these problems, he was going on an interview in Oklahoma, and he never travels by himself. But this particular time, he had to go by himself. And he showed up in Oklahoma at his hotel room, checked in, unloaded his car, and went to get something to eat and scout the location for filming the interview that he had to do in Oklahoma with Charles Key. And when he got back, he was gone maybe an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours. And when he got back, he noticed that his door was ajar, and when he went in his hotel room, it was completely gone through. I mean, it was completely ransacked. Everything in his hotel room, down to his toothpaste and underwear, were gone. They took everything. Now, not being suspicious, he ended up staying in the room anyway. And we had friends in Oklahoma City that helped him get the interview, so it wasn't a wasted trip. But he ended up coming home, and 2 weeks later, he nearly died. 2 weeks later, we were taking him to the hospital, and he was in intensive care for 4 days and in the hospital for 8, and still doesn't remember it. And he now has, he has a little bit of problems communicating live, so that's why he doesn't do live radio anymore. His, thought processes are a little slow for live radio, but he can still edit film, and he's still doing what he can do that way, but since then he's not been able to do live radio. So, and a lot of people, even people that are not conspiratorial, say, well, Debbie, you remember right before this, when he was in the hospital, I'm talking to my family who doesn't believe in all this stuff at all, I'm talking to my sister, and she says, well, Debbie, he was just out of town by himself, and his room got ransacked. I said, I know. She said, don't you think that's suspicious? I said, well, of course I think it's suspicious. And she said, well, I do too. I said, okay. Okay, I get it. And so we really don't know for sure what happened. He happened to be hypoglycemic before. He's now very diabetic. And it just kind of happened.
Well, that's interesting, because what I say, they kept me drugged for 3 months for 3 broken ribs, as far as I can tell.
Right.
3 broken ribs. But they told my family, oh, he's got a severe head injury, he may never be right again, get long-term care, get guardianship, do this, do that. And they tried. They were just following the instructions of a doctor. When I found out, they were trying to put me in a rest home, an old folks home. Then I got a little bit uptight about that.
Well, I would too.
But to this day, I don't know. Because I can't talk to my family about it. Right. He just did what the doctor told him to do. Make sure he takes his medicine. Make sure I'm not taking that medicine. It knocks me out. No, I'm not taking that medicine. The only medicine I need is a joint and a Harley. Thank you. I'll And so everybody walked away from me. And to this day, I don't know whether it was the drugs, whether it was the head injury, or, and why did 2 guys in blue pinstripe suits walk into my hospital and hey, Clay, have you been hallucinating? Yeah, a little. Why? Who are you? Well, we're CIA. Yeah, what are you doing in this country? What are you doing fucking with me?
Yeah.
Well, we don't like you publishing that motorcycle magazine. The reason they didn't like the motorcycle magazine is because the Free American was already down. It was dead. It hadn't been published for 3 months. And so where did they come from? There was no investigation. The woman that hit me was never went to trial, never appeared in court. Nobody could find her. And
oh, wow.
and So that's I would be very suspicious about what happened to William. I mean, all it takes is they could have put something on the doorknob of his hotel room, and suddenly he's ill. Suddenly he's got to go to the hospital, and that would happen. Now, you know, that could take 2 weeks.
Right. Well, we ended up checking him out. I was scared to death. I normally wouldn't go to a hospital personally, but he was literally on the verge of death, and there was nothing I could do about that. And when we got him there, his blood sugar was so high, in fact, the people at the hospital, at the emergency room, still consider him a miracle. They can't believe he lived through that, what he went through. They can still not believe it. He is the miracle case of that hospital right now. So, I mean, we're very blessed, because if it was them tampering with him, you know, he was strong enough to overcome it, and they didn't account for that.
Yeah, I said the where they made their mistake with me was trying to overdose Clay Douglas. You know. It just ain't gonna happen, folks. You know.
Yeah.
But these where is William going now? I mean, what are you guys going to be doing? You've got the 2 films out. You've got and I'm assuming you've got pretty good distribution on it.
We do. We do, and of course, you know, there are a lot of people interested in the FEMA camp business, so, you know, they spread information. We've got not a new film, it came out between the Camp FEMA films, Don't Tread on Me, which actually is the solution. This is the one that actually got William in the most trouble, is Don't Tread on Me, because it gives the solutions to all our problems right now, which is the 9th and 10th Amendment of the Bill of Rights. Take back your local governments. You know, the state governments and the federal governments are only going to fall if you get control of your local government. And that's what the 9th and 10th Amendment are about. And Don't Tread on Me has a huge cult following right now, because people are starting to realize that, wait a minute, you know, the federal government's supposed to be the little government, and your local governments are supposed to be the bigger governments. And so people are starting to really wake up, and it was popular with the Tea Party people because at the time it gave them the answers they needed, and it definitely supported their position of smaller government and, you know, more responsible local government. Now we're working on a new project. We don't even have the title of it yet, but it's an explanation of the Bill of Rights so that people can understand, because they're not teaching what they need to be teaching in schools. We know that. And as a matter of fact, my daughter, 18-year-old daughter, and we homeschool part-time, and she takes a couple of classes at the high school, and she took a government class this past year. Now, you would think, first of all, if you're going to teach a government class, you'd make it a full year-long class. Well, no, this is a half a year class. It's required because they teach Constitution, they teach state constitution and federal constitution in this half-year class. And it's mandatory to, you know, for high school students to get their high school diploma. But the problem with that is that they don't teach the right thing. And we already know that because we know that kids don't have a clue what they need to be fighting for. They don't understand, and we're finding that many adults don't understand. You know, everybody knows about the Second Amendment, you know, because everybody in America knows that they need to be armed. You know, that they have the right to be armed, and it's a big debate, so everybody knows about that. Everybody knows about your freedom of speech, but they don't understand why it's so important.
Now,
they don't.
Let me. One of the things that I pointed out to people back when I was going to school, which wasn't very long, but when I was going to school, they never taught us what communism was. They told us communism was bad. Castro was a communist. we were going over to Vietnam. I volunteered for Vietnam because we had to fight the communists over there. But they never taught us what communism was in school. They never taught us that the 10 planks of communism were abolition of private property, heavily progressive income tax, abolition of all rights of inheritance, confiscation of property of immigrants and rebels. Oh, you're smoking pot, man. You must be a rebel. Give me your car. Central bank. Number 5, central bank, and number 6, government control of communications and transportation, government ownership of factories and agriculture, government control of labor, corporate farms, regional planning, and government control of education. If they had taught us that, we might have, some bright little student, who looked up Santa Claus in the dictionary and realized what fictional meant. Somebody might have said, "Well, don't we have that here? Don't we have? Isn't that what we've got? Isn't that the system we got here? Isn't the DOT and the FCC and Archer Daniels Midland and Monsanto? Isn't that a corporate farm?"
Yeah, buddy. Yep. And these are things, these are definitely things that people need to understand. I mean, almost every one of these 10 planks has already been activated in the United States.
Yes.
Yet people, like you say, they don't teach what it is.
Well, and they
people
go after
don't understand. And now people have come to the point. People have come to the point where they expect their government to do everything for them. No, it's not the government's job to do everything for you in the United States of America. That's not why the United States of America was founded. The United States of America was founded so that you could do what you needed to do to pursue life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's why the United States of America was founded. Yet, the more we get into it, the more you find out that egregiousness started with the George Washington administration, with Alexander Hamilton, who put us under the very first federal bank. The very first private bank was not the Federal Reserve that we have now. It started with Alexander Hamilton.
That's right. I think that's
right.
Isn't that the reason he fought a duel over?
But and George Washington was reluctant to buy into it. He didn't want to buy into it, but Alexander Hamilton, who was the first Secretary of State, convinced him to do it. And there you have your first bank. The Federal Reserve that we have now is the third attempt at the government to make a federal bank work. The third attempt since the founding of this country. Now, that ought to tell you something. It ought to tell you something. It probably won't tell many people, but it ought to tell you, because it's failing too. As you already know, our economy is not getting better. They say our economy is getting better, and Obama came out in September and said, "Oh, people who say that the economy is over, the recession is over, say the recession's over." Really? Is that why we still have such high unemployment rate? And of course, the unemployment rate doesn't, this is the other thing that people don't take into consideration. Our employment rate is 9.4% right now. But that doesn't take into consideration the fact that many of these people are working part-time who need to be working full-time. It doesn't take into consideration the fact that many of the people that were on unemployment are no longer on unemployment. And it doesn't take into consideration the fact that many of the people who have been looking for work have given up. So you don't know exactly what the unemployment rate really is. They adjusted. You can go to their own website, and you can see that they adjust the unemployment rate for seasonal figures. Well, you know what? If we adjusted that for seasonal figures a long time ago, we would already know that the jobs created by the Obama administration were census jobs, and they are now gone. So people need to think about this stuff, but they don't, because they don't teach it in school.
I'm going to ask you one question. One of the things, when I got out of the hospital from what was obviously an assassination attempt, I didn't get much help from the Patriot movement. Now, William worked in the Patriot movement. You worked with some people that I'm not going to mention names or anything. But, you know, those people didn't like me very much either. And suddenly, everything seemed to fall apart. You know, why aren't patriots helping each other? Why aren't we backing each other up? Why isn't everybody, you know, talking about this and trying to help each other? You know, people have asked me, say, Clay, why do you hate the Jews? I said, I don't hate the Jews. I admire them. If us white boys had this together as they do, we'd own the Federal Reserve, we'd own the Bank of England, we'd own the International Monetary Fund.
Well, part of the problem, as I've seen, I've been in alternative radio for not as long as you, but I've been in alternative radio for a long time, and I've been connected roundaboutly to several prominent radio shows, and we have worked with some people. You know, William has interviewed several people within the Patriot radio community, but they all seem to have their own issue that's important to them, and they don't seem to be willing to come together on other issues. They, you know, it seems to be hard to get them to unite because, you know, in one instance their issue is very important and they need it to be in the forefront, yet your issue might be not in the forefront for you, so they don't take it seriously. You know what I mean? That's mostly what I see. There's a lot of backbiting in the Patriot community as well. And I think it stems from maybe fear, maybe somebody wants to be in the position of leader, and we don't really need a leader as such. We need a guide, but I don't think we need a leader, if that makes sense to you.
I think so, because, you know, I don't want to run the world. I don't want to control anyone. I just want to be free. And we're out of time. Debbie, thank you for being on with me. The links to your site and your films are on there. And, you know, tell William that we'll all pray for him and make sure he stays well.
We appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me on, Clay.
Thank you, dear. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.